Right. So we'll start with what is an API, and then why we need APIs, and how it's going to connect with today's infrastructure, and why we should worry more on this. And also, as people who are learning this DevOps infrastructure and security, also why it is important. And of course, I'm introducing these security aspects as well for you guys, especially. I think learning about security is very important, and your assignment also, I think you can touch on whatever the implementation that you do, right? You can touch on the security aspects as well. So this will be introductory on that as well, because you know that what happened during the last few years, probably soon after the COVID started, security became one of the top things even before that, but it became really a hit because of people doing all this ransomware and other attacks. Right, so let's dive in. Anytime you can stop me and ask your questions. So please don't go ahead with any of the questions that you're having. Right, okay, so let's start and demystifying what are APIs. So can someone please give me a quick overview of what is an API? Yes, anyone? Okay, so let me then start, then in the middle you guys can jump in. So API in our terms, it's like application programming interface. So why we need APIs? Because APIs can be developed at multiple different levels. So you can go to a language, so language level API can be there. And when you go higher up, right, you can develop different types of API to interfacing, right? So this comes with software engineering concepts as well. Probably have learned about this cohesion coupling. So the idea is once you have APIs, it will be easier to connect independent components. But if you don't use the concept of APIs, you're always building up tightly coupled systems, which might not be the best strategy to go ahead with. So this is where APIs are more used these days, because it really values to develop better, I would say, quality software, right? And don't take it wrong. Some people think when you say API right now, it's all about web API. No, it's not the case, right? So APIs can be in multiple places, software libraries, and when you have dependencies, or maybe in the infrastructure level, right? So you can communicate with APIs very easily. And APIs always define a very, I would say, very clear documentation on how to use them, right? And this can be done in multiple different formats, multiple different concepts, right? So you will see some of them later on. But you can build API in your own way. So as an example, even C language, you can build up API. But now the APIs that we are referring are mostly accessible through HTTP gateways, right? So that's where a lot of people think it's only about web. That is not. But because we are living in a decentralized world, so most of those APIs are opened up using HTTP gateways, right? So through HTTP, you can access it. But is it the only way how to enable APIs in a decentralized world? Can any one of you tell me if you are experts on doing this in your day job? So what are the other ways where we can develop an API, which is a library, and you are allowing anyone to connect your library outside without giving a HTTPI end? Sorry, it's not HTTPI, but HTTP end. What are the other methods that you can do that? So we have around 60 people in the room. I think there should be enough software developers, architects, and whoever. You should be using APIs as a day job. So can you please let me know at what levels and what different ways that you're using APIs other than HTTP? Yes, please go ahead. Someone? Oh, there's no one doing an API. That's bullshit. So tell me there should be someone who is working with APIs. So let me select someone randomly. Sanura, are you not doing any API work or anything related to APIs? Surely you're doing, right? You guys can hear me, right? Oh, we have one. Yes,
Hi, sir.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
Kodithu. Yes,
actually, we are using token authentication.
right. Okay.
Uh, yeah, in .NET platform, there is identity core available there in build authentication library, and we are using that to authenticate endpoints when the clients
What
calling
is your first
time.
name, Kodithu Akku?
Chaminda.
Chaminda, can you please, yes, I don't really want to directly go into security itself. Can you please let me know how
Okay.
do you use APIs in your .NET environment? What sort of APIs you use? Can you please give some details to our participants here today? So that will be very beneficial because you are coming from the industry. So what
Yeah.
purposes, what sort of APIs, and what is the technology behind the API you're using? And also, is it through HTTP you're accessing all this, or do you use just at the programming level? Can you please explain that a bit?
Yeah. Actually, we are using in our .NET architecture, we are using our web controllers,
Okay.
actually web API controllers, and they are using to they are giving they are exposing to outside whatever the jobs we need to expose to our third party vendors like that in our system. They have some services we are providing our mobile uh, developers and their applications, and also some of other vendors, like they have some other uh, vendors they need to get some vehicle details, like
Okay.
their registrations and all. So we are providing those stuff through our system.
Sure. Thank you so much. And one other thing, Chaminda, like, can you please let me know how easy it is? Now, probably you being a developer for some time, and probably there were days without using APIs. Also, you tried to connect with like through middleware and all that. I don't know whether you had that experience. How easy to work with
Okay.
APIs? How easy it is to work with APIs? Do you think the APIs? Now, of course, there's a huge, tremendous growth in the area of API. And it seems like without APIs, it's very difficult for us to work on a decentralized environment. Like we said, there are third-party vendors and there are multiple outside organizations where you have to connect with, right? So
Yes.
how important is APIs right now?
Yeah. Actually, we are using different technologies. I mean, sometimes .NET to Java, sometimes some other paradigms, but this is actually a interoperability based concept. So we need to send some common platform. So for current trend is HTTP based calls using JSON and
Yes.
based on JSON.
Yes.
So, but those days we use some uh, services
RMI,
called that.
things like
Yeah,
RMI,
like
Java
that.
RMI.
Yeah,
Okay.
Java, Remite, those things.
Yeah. So
But
are
I
you
mostly work with.
were you there like 10
Yeah.
years back where there's something called COBA? Probably not,
Uh,
right?
Actually, I'm not.
At all, right?
Yeah, familiar with those stuff. Like,
Okay. Okay.
I'm also. I'm most of familiar with .NET technologies.
Understood. Understood.
So those days we are using
Mm, mm.
SOAP services.
Sure. Understood. Thank you so much. So how long you been there in the industry?
Yeah, more than 10.
Okay, so
10 years.
probably, yeah, probably those days there was this RMI and all that, depending on what platform that you've been working with. Thank you so much. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
Oh, yeah.
later on we can have a
Yeah.
quick discussion about this.
Yeah. Okay. Those days also we have used some found WCF
Okay, WCF.
foundation.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
so these different companies, they say Microsoft, whether it's say from Java is not a company, but it's technology and the mobile technology, they all tried out different things. I can remember in 2005, 6, 7, they were using this middleware. Specifically, they were worried about like the easiest way to work with the decentralized environment, or those days we used the term distributed environments. So those were like the earlier days of making it DevOps, right? So trying to codify everything, infrastructure in coding. So they tried to use this middleware, right? So there were several actually. And there was a nice middleware called COBA, which really worked out. And the theory-wise, it was very difficult to understand, but still it did work out. And this is basically the COBA platform pinned out from things like Java RMI. But Java RMI is more friendlier than COBA, but still that middleware concepts are really used. So I think in WSO2 also they developed this middleware. They has different strategies. I'm not really expertise on any of those, but I think people who are at WSO2 probably can talk more about these things. Yes, anyone else wants to add anything?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, Isuru. Yes, go ahead, please.
We are developing, actually we are not developing APIs. So we are developing a platform to develop APIs using the connectors. So APIs are, so we promote developing APIs through low code. So that means we are fully into Synapse configuration. So that means you can develop APIs using XML. So it's based on XML. So you don't have to be expertise on Java or any other kind of a programming language. So in that case, how we pack APIs on inside a Carbon application. To develop APIs, you just have to you have a tool, we call it Integration Studio. So using that, you just have to like download and just drag and drop the connectors and whatever the content that you need to input and output. So you can have the connectors also. So that's how we provide APIs. I mean, we provide platform to develop APIs and they are packed in a Carbon application. So the APIs can be on board by starting a server and you place particular Carbon application in a desired folder. So you can just simply, provide an HTTP endpoint to an API.
Thanks, Isuru. Thanks a lot. So probably at the end of the session, we can have a look at this architecture, which is provided by WSO2, including this the code libraries and everything. So we'll have a look at it after. Thank you so much. And of course, Dinuka had shared architecture, so you guys can look at it. Maybe Dinuka is also from WSO2, right? So you guys can have a look at it. So we'll actually it's okay, that's about event library, but anyway, you can just go through that one as well. We'll come back to all this after the initial few slides. Thank you so much for sharing it. So I think this is a huge discussion. Probably next week also we can continue on this, right? Because this is very much important to DevOps and SysOps and every other thing. So this is like the glue for me, like where everything get connected at the end of the day. So let's jump in. So my point of view here is to work on the idea of API security, but knowing what is API is very important. Right? So it's a kind of a big topic altogether. Anyone else wants to give any comment before I start the rest of it? Sangeet, Vindana, anyone who?
Yes, sir. Basically, we used to develop web APIs.
Vindana, can you tell me where do you work now, and just a bit?
Yeah, I just work for ADL, ACR Digital Labs.
Sure.
And of course, actually, we are using WSO2 Telco API Gateway as well to expose our APIs.
Sure.
So what we do actually, we use microservice architecture. They are Spring Boot or Node.js we are using to develop APIs. But those are mostly web APIs, like you said, right? Sure. But apart from that, I was thinking, can we consider middleware as another API category?
So to my knowledge, so others can correct me if I'm wrong. So now the whole idea of middleware earlier was developed in the where when the distributed systems had a lot of things to be shared. So it was not easy in the initial days because you find a lot of different types of technology endpoints. So then the problem is like, how do you share? There was no kind of an ocean of data to be shared very easily. So then the initial solution, even though it's a kind of a bulkier solution than say Web APIs, Web APIs is much easier. But of course, there are so many things that you don't have in a Web API, like security, performance, and other things. So middlewares actually came into being because to make the life of a distributed company much easier. So if you get this same architectural COBA, so what happens is you can create high performing socket connections at the end, within the middleware. So what you should do is you have a way of connecting into this middleware. It's a very transparent system, whereas it's completely transparent. Even you don't see that there's a middleware. You see only the endpoint at the end. I think you all understand what I'm saying. So as if you're going through from connecting here to Los Angeles, one of those say companies and their products and their libraries, you're connecting. If there are so many things to configure in between, okay, you have to connect to this DNS, you have to connect to this router, you have to connect to this whatever, blah, blah, blah. And at the endpoint, there are some proxies you have to connect to, and then you have to convert it to a different file format, and then you have to decode it, encode it. If you go through all that hell, you understand there's a very huge complexity. And then again, there's another endpoint you have to connect it to in Japan. You have to go through a different format. So this is kind of a pain in your ass. So this is the same problem that tried to solve using middleware earlier, right? So now, of course, WSO have their high performing middleware. It's very different from what we had earlier. So those middleware, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, right? So maybe I'm not in touch with the exact technology, but anyway, so those middleware try to solve that problem. Now, when you have the middleware like COBA or even RMI, the only issue was it's Java specific. But if you get COBA, it can be used with any different languages as well. You can have a C at the Los Angeles office. There can be a C++ backend. Japan office, there can be a, say Python or something backend. There's no Python, I believe, at least to the extent of enterprise usage. But they say they had some Fortran backend or something, and we are using Java here in Sri Lanka. So you don't have any complexity. You're just connecting. You have one simple COBA call, API call. That's also the API call, right? To make in your code level, and rest of is being simply handled by the middleware. So that's where actually the middleware idea came, I think, long before the web APIs, right? Then what happened, I think this concept was used heavily, and then newer concepts came in. At the same time, there was this improvement of web APIs, where SOAP came in, and then XML came in, and then of course other things like JSON, asynchronous calls, async calls, and everything. Now we are in a state where I can do things faster, but still this is like a messy world when you talk about APIs, like sorry, web APIs, right? So others also can comment on this because this is probably the important discussion. So then again, okay, so I think what companies like WSO2 is doing is they have a kind of a mix of both worlds. So they have their own middleware also, but at the same time they are using these newer technologies to make it more transparent. So I think in the outset, what is more important is you should not see the bloody complexities in the network. You should have a very transparent system where you see just the endpoint, and in between all the security, performance, quality of services, whatsoever, the shit should be handled by the middleware. So this is the way how I take it. Yes, Vindan, you can comment on it.
Yeah, sure, sir. But especially I have experience with web API developments,
Sure.
rather other technologies actually.
Sure.
So they are, like I said, we mainly use Node.js and the Spring Boot technologies to develop these APIs. Especially we just want to segregate front end from the back end business logics. Okay. Right. So they are we were in the process of developing the APIs. Okay. And for the security purpose, so if you need to expose your APIs only, rather exposing a complete system with end-to-end functionalities. If you need to only share your functionalities to the outside, then there we used actually WSO2 Telco API gateway. So then people, if someone interested in only consuming the APIs for their purpose, then they should be able to come and create the accounts and consume our APIs. That's how it's. So I have the experience on those APIs.
Thanks, thanks, Vindan. Okay, yeah, I think we can continue the discussion. Anyone else want to add anything? So I highly recommend to look at their WSO2. They have some, I'm not saying it's the only company in Sri Lanka who is using this heavily, but I have seen they are using it. So they have several webinars as well as I will share them. And also they have a certificate also you can follow through. Yes, it's true. Continue, please.
So you were commenting on non-HTTP APIs.
Sure.
So in that case, so Maven dependencies are also APIs, right? So
Okay. Yes.
in that case,
Yes. True. Yes.
yeah, I just wanted to ask that.
Okay, sure, exact. So yeah, so there are several other ways of connecting with APIs, and so now there are so much of new technologies popping up. So we'll try to get into those things at the end or probably next week. So this can be very interesting. So people who had never had any idea about APIs also, guys, please like try to capture this idea if you are working on a development career or something related, even security or even infrastructure side. I think this is very, very useful because you can't just skip it these days. The serverless computing to microservices to everything is like this. Now this word is SOA is no longer used, right? So those days, that's one of the funny words that we always use. I did a research back in 2006 with University of Colombo in my master's. So we actually, I wanted to do something funny, like because we were doing like this high performing computing. We use a framework called Globus. Still is there, but it's like something called grid computing. Now actually the name is different, but we have blockchains and everything. So that all relate to that because there's so much of research being done on that as well. So this grid computing is no longer talked about, but the base concepts are still there. So this Globus toolkit was, so basically there were some grids, like grids is like peer-to-peer computing, where anybody can donate our CPU power to a kind of this thing called the grid. So unfortunately, we haven't had any grids in Sri Lanka, but there were some in Europe. There was a very famous one called NordoGrid in Norwegian countries. So they also use all this API related computing. So to do that, because we are talking about sending messages here and there to the network to these endpoints. So they also had middleware to handle it. So this is a bigger topic, but anyway, let's try to get that base concept, so which is useful. Then you can, depending on your needs, depending on your interest, you can dive down. Okay, let's start the slide deck. So API is basically a application programming interface. So you can see in the figure, a mobile app or a web app can connect through the API to the database. So this is very simply, you can put it as an API. It provides a computer-friendly method of interacting. So that is the most important thing. It should be computer-friendly, where you don't really have to worry about configuring a lot of things. So we have already configured it. And this is where, if you have these things properly lined out, you can use things like machine learning or any other newer technologies where you can do things better, faster, right? So high performing, right? So they're saying it's computer friendly to interact with the data source or a backend logic. So of course, this database can be replaced with a backend logic or any other thing, even IoT device, or even it can be like a social network, right? Complete a network where, it's so interesting in massive scale, you can communicate with it. So these days, this big data and everything. So all these things, we need the API. So this wheel that you are seeing in the middle can change the way how we interact with things. So they are used in both mobile and web, and this means the developers can be lazy. So obvious, right? So any smarter or a complex system can be masked through an API. I think you all agree with me. And so this is, in a way, it's good, right? Why the hell I really wanted to know the complexities of another company? So I really wanted to make sure that I get some service. If I have to pay, I'll pay. And I want to get it connected to Secure and get my work done. It can be CNN who provides us business insight, or it can be Facebook who be giving us proper interfacing to do proper advertisements. And also, if I can talk to them through my logic, or even I can do a machine learning call, like a knowledge call, like, so as an example, NLP call. So I can say, okay, I wanted to find who are the best YouTubers right now for me to advertise. So a single call like that, so you can build app for that, right? So I think there's no such app. Mobile app එක ගන්නවා, app එක open කරනවා, කතා කරන විතරයි වා කරන්නේ. So NLP එකක් තියෙනවා. NLP එක convert වෙනවා your base idea, and it will be calling all the hundreds of APIs, whatever the companies. Of course, there will be a payment to involve, but they can find out with the stats and everything from other companies. So මේ වගේ apps හදුවොත් මොකද මිලියන එකකට හම්බ කරන්න පුළුවන්. App developer කෙනෙක් හම්බ කරලා හදන්න. Toolkit එක දැන්ටම තියෙනවා NLP. So there's a library called BERT, if you have heard about it. So learn machine learning, everyone. Guys, learn machine learning. If you want, I can do a session on machine learning next week. If you're very new to it, because DevOps guys also should know machine learning. So I was intending to do that with the time, we'll see. So because there's magic that you can do with this. So only thing is we are like, one of the problems what we are facing is we know technology, but we don't use technology for betterment. So that is something that we should do, and we should create something out of the technology. So because that's something that is missing. So we are as an industry in Sri Lankan industry, there can be 100,000, there are around 300 software companies as I know, but still the problem is we haven't created much of startups, or even there are people who are working for 10 to 15 years but haven't started doing any sort of application. So we should try that out. I think that's been changing now, but yeah, so we need more. Right. Okay. So let's move on. More on API. Web APIs collaborate. So now hereafter it will be more referring to web APIs because we are talking about security aspect as well. But anyway, remember there's a lot to learn here and very interesting because you can earn some bucks out of it also, because I'm going to introduce probably later on some concept called bug bounty. Right. So we'll move on. Web APIs collaborate with applications in different associations or stages. Social affiliations, games, information bases, and contraptions. So anyway, the base idea is you can connect with many different sources through web API. Plus Internet of Things applications and contraptions use APIs to accumulate information or even control different gadgets. So I told you. So there were days where it was very difficult to connect with devices because all devices are different. They had their own technology. It's kind of a very kind of a nightmare to connect to those devices, and you have to know electronics, and you have to know these function calls. If you have been using Arduino, or Raspberry or whatever. So yeah, so you have to do a lot of things, right? So yeah, so but now it's just a web API, so it's very simple. Right. So what do they look like? So this is a simple API that you are seeing. The one in the left-hand side is a normal API which uses this JSON-like format. Right. So as you can see, it says commonly this is JSON or XML, and JSON is far more common. So I think JSON also is an extraction of XML, but it's more, I would say, more friendlier and more, I would say, beautiful in usage than XML. XML can be quite harder to look at because it's more machine friendly than human friendly. But this guy called JSON is more obviously human friendly. So you can, as you can see here, not sure whether it's very clear, but it's talking about storing information about employee, which you can use a get call. If you are hearing this for the first time, in HTTP there's a get call and a post call, and there are a few other calls as well, update, delete, and all that. But HTTP, the most famous request call is called a get. So from the other side, you are saying, okay, give me the employee information, and I need employee one's information, and this is what you get, right? So you get an employee called Max Musterman, items, the name is there, and some other information. So these are tuples that you get from that data set to this side. Right. So that is a normal, I would say a normal API call which uses JSON. And the next one that you are seeing is called industry, the new guy in the block, which is called GraphQL. I know that one first day that we talked, we had a Clubhouse session. Somebody talked about graph that they are doing GraphQL, right? So this is a GraphQL call. So this one is more friendlier in terms for security because we don't release a lot of information. We don't even say it's employee, right? So you can just say a GQL call, which is a standard call in GraphQL. So people who don't have idea about what is this, don't worry. So this is basically represent the same information as a graph, right? So advantage, you can do highly optimized queries and highly flexible queries here in this GraphQL. So remember, I'm trying to bring this new technology also in because this is something very new in the industry. You guys have to learn that as well. Right. So often they are returned data directly from the database, or of course, as we said earlier, also a backend logic. In this case, we return a database record, employee, and related records, items that belongs to the employee. So test data, blah, blah, blah. Okay, is that clear, everyone? Okay, there's a request to do a machine learning. Of course, we'll do that. All right. Perfect. Let's move on. Right. So now this is a bit about JSON. So what does JSON stand for? Java Serialized Object Notation. Is it Java? Okay, JavaScript. Yes, JavaScript probably. Right. So it's like a way how we can serialize the data one after the other, not a parallelization. It's very hard to say that word, right? So serialization, and of course it's about the notation, how to serialize the objects. So JSON is a way to represent data in a text format, which is the easiest way to share, right? But in the future, this might change, guys. Right? Text, I don't know, right? So yeah, but text is always powerful. If you talk about Linux platform, it's all a text, right? Or text base. So it starts with the curly braces and ends with the 1. So that simplification is already there. And in programming language learning, we talked about, okay, these are called this start in brackets, end brackets. So this is a way of making your code much more simpler or understandable, readable. So these values are there in JSON. And JSON contains objects which are denoted with these curly brackets. And of course, then it has the other notational things like the arrays, these square brackets, all this fun stuff. And then they use this, you have the key value pairs. So everything is defined as a key value pair for the identification. So people who never heard about this key value concept, key, guys, is a 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is Nima, 2 is Kamal, 3 is whoever. Right? So this is called a key value concept. And this is also introduced some time back and is being heavily used now. And one advantage of having this key value is identification is much easier. So as you can see here, ID and value, those things are defined here. So then thereafter, that is the base structure which is used throughout the documentation. And how to find APIs? APIs exist in range of web or mobile apps. So now we are narrowing down, because end of the day you will understand. I'm going to introduce quickly, if time permits, a concept called bug bounty. So there also this comes quite handy. So and they do looked at APIs, especially they check for the API security in web or mobile APIs. So keep an eye out for specifically web app, which also has a mobile app. So now I'm targeting yourself. Okay, think, okay, from where your security hats here for a moment. So say if you want to work with the APIs, so think about the web app where they surely have a mobile app as well. Web app with a lot of complex and front-end activity and almost all mobile apps, right? And also web page that takes a longer time to load. Why? Because they are calling some APIs in the background. So you know that, okay, there's a API involved here. Web app with developer documentation. Also, we can do look at any website where I have any developer documentation or web app with developer documentation. They will specifically say, okay, they are using several APIs. Right, and also of course some site where I have very complex interfacing, so they might be using multiple web APIs. Right, so then we look at types of APIs available. So these are the ones I think you all know in general world. SOAP is one which is used like throughout the history, and now of course there are better, I would say, better ones to substitute SOAP. But SOAP is also still important. So it's less common, usually uses XML and has a header and a body. So this SOAP calls would have a header and a body. So header is to represent what comes next. And RESTful, probably another big term that you have heard about, restless RESTful protocols, most common API type, and it uses JSON. So this is the one that we use heavily, has a defined structure in request. So it doesn't specifically have a header, but you can define the structure in using the RESTful call. Right, and the new kid in the block is the GraphQL, which is also again very interesting. There's heavy usage of this newcomer, and use a custom query language. It has a specific language to use, which is good, because then you have to basically work with the whatever the facilities provided with that. There was internet connection, it seems. Am I audible enough? Hope it's all right.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Thank you. Right. So a single endpoint powers all the API, and this is good GraphQL because you can. It's like you are entering through this gate to a universe. Right? So RESTful might not be the case. You might need a lot of different endpoints, which is kind of a security vulnerability as well. But GraphQL has this one entry point, but the way how you make the query call, you can get any information. So that is also powerful. At the same time, you have to safeguard that particular entry point, because when you get entered to that, thereafter, okay, that can be concerning. In Game of Thrones, in the wall where there's this one entry point, somebody can, basically exploit it. Then thereafter, whoever the other side, the army can come into the the normal world. So this is the problem, right? So the same logic here. And of course, there are some others where sometimes you can have JSON calls and then WebSockets and many more different technologies are there, which you can use as APIs. So in the slide also, you see few of them are listed here. So you see library-based APIs, class-based APIs, and few other. And of course, you can see object remote APIs, .NET remoting, and I think that's been replaced now. I think one of our participants talk about this API calls that they're using in .NET framework, web API controllers. So these have been replaced, this .NET remoting and all that. Yeah, so that is there. So and then hardware APIs also can be seen. Right, so this is the first one, which is there called SOAP. SOAP called Simple Object Access Protocol. Right, so which is kind of very interesting one those days. So SOAP's natural WS security standard. So remember, there were several standards came with this starting with the prefix WS. I can remember it was kind of highly complex for me those days because there are so many of them, but it should be there. Otherwise, of course, if you don't have proper standards, best practices, people will do it in their own way, because XML and all these things, guys, you can customize to your needs. But if you don't have a proper standard to define the structure, this can be haywire. So because anybody can do, and things can go ugly in a very simple time. And yes, so the rule understood by SOAP and the envelope. So there's a envelope which carries the data, payload, transmit require more overhead. So this is why there was a need to a better, easier, and a more, I would say, flexible protocol called REST. So REST fully means representational state transfer. So idea is you can represent your state from one end to the other end much easily. Right? So that facilities were there in SOAP, but it was very hard to do. But you can just call like a JSON call, you can represent the current state to the other side. So it uses HTTP to get data. That's probably the most powerful thing that they pushed out, because HTTP is everywhere and anybody can do HTTP. What you need is just a browser. Right? So browser has all the component to modulate and also filter out HTTP messages. And methodology on distant PC structures. So, and also the cool thing is it's not a platform dependent, because HTTP can run on any device these days. Even a small watch, you can run HTTP because it has the facilities, the libraries are available. So a browser, you don't need the browser, you need only the browser library. Right? If you have this Chrome library, you can put it anywhere, or a TV or even a router. Where else? Like see, like now a router can consume any web service offered from anywhere else. So because now this library component is there, so your web API call can be done from there as well. If you have a kind of glasses that you wear, if it can run this small, I don't know, some embedded system, if you can run this library, this Chromium library, the easiest one, sorry, the Google Chrome library, there are some very simple memory footprint libraries. You don't need like even few KBs, but still you can process HTTP. So that is a fascinating world out there, right? And then HTTPS to achieve secure correspondence. REST uses JSON standard for consuming API loads, which enhances the data move over programs. And REST is stateless. So REST is stateless, obviously. So, and then each HTTP request contain all crucial information, inferring that the client know the specialist is expected to hold any data to satisfy solicitation. So basically what is trying to say, all this English is, so REST will ensure the need for to transfer the states from one end to the other, but itself is not a stateful transmission. Right, so that will be enough. So this is a nice comparison in between SOAP and REST. So you all have to know this. So SOAP is a strict protocol, but REST is based on the patterns, right? Because when you say patterns, it's totally talking about best practices. And state of SOAP is basically stateful or stateless, depending on how we use it. But REST is stateless. It is important because if it is stateful protocol, there are a lot more you have to do within the protocol. But now REST will create the states, the endpoint, so it's much easier to use it. And of course, SOAP is restricted only for XML, but REST can use XML and beautiful JSON and HTML or plain text. And the message is they are using something called Postcard, where it's the same problem, it's the same. And transfer protocols, of course, now it's all limited to HTTP, HTTPS, but SOAP was more widespread. And as you can see, they allowed to use FTP, TCP, So you're getting bit down under SMTP and XMPP, right? So probably that also you have heard about earlier. And this is the one you had a lot of standard, I can remember from W3C, right? WSDL, but they are using something called WADL, but not being changed there. And then caching is, of course, is very important for these things. So there was a caching module, and actually REST uses the existing one, which is in HTTP. Good in way and bad in a way, because sometimes if HTTP is vulnerable, whatever the version that you're using, so it basically hits everything, because in SOAP cases there were separate ones, which is in a way it's good, right? And security, of course, there's a plenty of things, and plenty means complexity means again security can be a killer. So it's not the best strategy, right? So having all these things, but now this guy maybe uses on HTTPS and SSL, which can be easy, because simple can be secure, complex can be insecure. So that's my way of thinking about it. And speed, of course, SOAP is more slower because it is bulky, headers and envelopes and all this shit, but the rest is always faster. But faster doesn't mean secure. Learning curve, REST is very easy. And community, of course, now, of course, SOAP, there's a very small community. But remember, guys, one thing very carefully, this, there's no one company control in this, right? So that's a good thing. But when the community works on these things, you have to understand, sometimes this can take time, to get the best things out. So that's why the biggest problem, soon as you see that there's some companies like Google pushing it, things move faster. Right, any questions? Hope that's clear. I hope that you are getting something to your head, right, rather than just listening. Right, so RESTful next. So RESTful APIs are really easy. So they have defined structure which relates to CRUD functions. So now I'm not going to directly go to CRUD, but you can see it here. So this create, read, update, delete, so which is available in HTTP, right? So this is available for these guys as well. And their structure of RESTful or the API is defined based on these function calls. So these are called HTTP request calls. So you can make a create or a post call or a get call. So update call or a delete call. The one which is used heavily is called the read one, because that's called the get call. And the next important one is the create one, which is, as an example, if you want to do something at the other end, you can always use post. But people tend to use it on their own way. So, but you have to be very careful, because if you're just using post call unnecessarily, that can create a lot of vulnerabilities. That's a question. Okay, does it mean SOAP is secure than REST, or it's up to developer? Yeah, now this is the thing. Yes, as a definition, SOAP is more secure than the REST, but it's totally based on what you do really. So what are the practices that you do? Because to this extent, no protocol here mandates for you to use everything. I think SOAP mandated more than the REST. So you can loosely use those technologies as well, which is probably the bad thing, right? So that is where you have to have more rules in your organization when you're doing these things, right? So you can easily predict new endpoints simply by knowing an application. So as an example, if YouTube API has something like get video one, get call එකක් තියෙනවා, read කරනවා video one එක ඔයාලට try out කරන්න පුළුවන්, right? Delete video one also exists. මෙහෙම තියෙනවා video delete කරන්න පුළුවන් having the authentication, right? So now this is in intuition, guys. So hereafter security hat, right? So get call එකක් තියෙනවා video one කියලා ඔකට ඕන තරම් බලා ගන්න බෑ, URL ගහලා මම දැන් මෙලා පෙන්නන්න යන්නේ, right? So delete කියලා තියෙන ඉඩ තියෙනවා. There be a better chance that you will have something like that. And that if YouTube has videos, maybe get comment also exists, right? Make a get comment right? So get video and get comment or get what reply or get I don't like, get love or Instagram love right? Twitter love the right? So you can just look at it. They are widely used. However, some of the endpoints may be more custom. They may then want to delete post tag, post one or post one delete. So it can be any one of these methods. If you want to delete a post, you can go with a delete call, like here in the CRUD call, delete call, or you can do a post call as you ask in the parameterizing it to delete it. So you can see how creative these things are. So by using different combinations, people can use different things, right? And as hackers, right, wearing the hat of a hacker, you can see there are so many things which are not in control. So you guys can even predict a lot of things. So this is where you use the manual intervention tools. But as a human security expert, you can go there and predict these things, and then you can attack. Right. They usually return JSON. You can get a burp plugin. Burp introduce burp suit is another very, very, very useful tool. Who are doing anyone doing bug bounty. So anyone, I told you about few times about this bug bounty thing. The bug bounties, guys, like you can even $20,000 per month if you want to as a side hustle. YouTube side hustle business. So this is another one that you guys can do, bug bounty. Right? So bug bounty is really, really fun. Obviously I need a different class to do that, but I'll be doing this. Session called Bug Bounty. You guys can join in if you want to. And I don't know how many of you joined this Tuesday's coaching and mentoring session. So this week we are having a person. So I haven't had the session for some time because it was very busy. And we're going to start on this next Tuesday. And we are going to have a experienced Linux person. So I would think all the DevOps students should come there because it will be very useful. So we're going to have an introduction to Ansible as well, which I'll be covering in a different. Probably I'll put a recorded session because I want to cover more, so the live sessions can be used to other discussions. Right. So Ansible is the next technology you will going to learn anyhow. Right. So then, of course. Okay. So this is another term that they use called beautifier. So it's very interesting one. There's a plugin in the Burp to do that. Okay, then GraphQL, the one that I explained to you earlier. This is also very important because everybody is using it right now. GraphQL can be more difficult to spot because unique language. GraphQL a unique way to handle it. Say single endpoint powers and also uses custom query. Custom query they have this unique way of doing it. GQL Q. GraphQL Q. So it can be bit kind of difficult to attack through this method. And GraphQL has a major advantage for hackers because it's super easy to enumerate. Now, even though this is difficult, but you can pass through the messages and you can query the whole thing, You can query the whole thing with different creative ways. Like SQL injection, SQL, you can even delete a database inside. So because these technologies are not written in a way thinking about security. So it's a very fascinating world out there because you being creative, you can do a lot of fun stuff. And unfortunately, you don't understand it's all about creativity. It's nothing about technology, nothing about any other thing. So security, most of the time, it's all about creativity. How you connect these dots, right? So I don't know. So if a creative person, like I was these days rewatching Harry Potter, right? So I was just thinking, what sort of a brain this lady is having called J.K. Rowling. She's trying to connect all the dots with all these things, I don't know, muggles and, goblins and, so she probably had read all these nice stories, fantasies in her childhood, but is trying to create a complete different world with connecting the dots, right? So it's a different universe, it seems, multi-universe. So for us, even who's the other bugger? Game of Thrones. I remember Tolkien, right? So he created completely different phenomenon. So being very creative. And then the Wheel of Time, the new one is coming to Amazon Prime. If you have watched or read the Wheel of Time, it's a huge series. Again, around 10 books. That original author actually died. Now a new author started it, of course, time back. But this is new and it's coming to Amazon Prime. Watch it, guys, if you're into fantasy stuff. Perfect, right? So this is being very creative. So somebody like that even come to technology and learn GraphQL, they can do more better things than us. I'll tell you why, because it's all about creativity, right? If you learn it better, you'll find it that fascinating because you don't really need a PhD to do any of those things. You have just to be creative, right? So GraphQL has a major advantage, like talked about it. So this is like the CRUD, how they use the CRUD. So mutations, queries, mutations. So you can do different mutations or different combinations, guys. Very simply put in it. These are also written JSON, but it looks weird when compared to REST. Why weird? Because this can be lengthy, because you're talking about a graph that you're querying. However, you probably need some practice roaming. So there's this place, I will put a link, Hacker 101. So there's a CTF box. Again, it's a new concept to you. If you're not into security, there's some capture the flag tournaments. There are many outside. So you can play one of them. It's really, really fun. It's like playing Call of Duty or whatever that you like to play. Right. While GraphQL is definitely not a substitute for REST, of course, and the two API styles will continue to agree. And more agreed on GraphQL like structures. I think I explained to Roam Research, which I'm using for my journaling and note taking. It's a graph. By graph, it's important. It's by way or two-way, and it can do powerful things, powerful queries as well. It is unquestionably standard choice. In fact, its reputation is finding ways to agitate a period of web API access to control establishing. Simply, there are multiple ways it's finding out to proper web API creativity or sorry, connectivity, right? So because simply saying it getting popular every day. This unsettling influence focus on huge uniqueness from acclaimed REST plan. I think REST plan or Venus maker. GraphQL requires don't recognize don't recognize the data being gotten through HTTP URL. So it's not a mandatory requirement. Possibly GraphQL perceives, right, the data reference using its inquiry language. There's something like query language like SQL. So it can do all the math and the magic, right? Okay. So this is a good example. So what you find in REST API is movies, there's a one separate endpoint. Directors, there's another endpoint. HTTP call like /movies කියලා. /directors. මේක එහෙම එකක් නැහැ. මේක එක endpoint එකයි තියෙන්නේ. Movies directors ඔක්කොම ඇතුලේ ඉන්නේ. Is that clear up to this point? Let me know if it is not. Sorry.
Sir, can you explain a bit on the previous slide? So the comparison between REST API and GraphQL?
Okay. You mean this slide or this one? Both.
The one after, sir. The just before the last.
This one?
This one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So here, forget about the English. So this I've taken from actually the what is that Wikipedia entry, right? To this one. This is the Wikipedia entry, guys. Right. So now see the idea. It's a very simple one. What it's trying to say is GraphQL is definitely not the substitute for REST. So not that it's going to overlap REST and completely remove REST from the picture. No, that's not the idea. This will be a compared parallel technology. But the thing is, because of the way how it creates that connectivity and the way how it helps the developer, dev, or whoever to communicate and do things, get things done, because it's very easier. Right, so it seems to be getting more popular. That's the second thing that they're saying, right? So I'm not going converting to word to word, but the concept. So I think you understand that. So it's not a substitute for REST, but still it's getting popular because the way how it is structured. And then, of course, they don't need the HTTP URIs as it is given in REST. REST, everything you should give it from movies directors, but it is not needed. So there's a little that they can predict. Hackers can predict on what's going here. So that is completely now in hidden or in blind. So developers has to know, sorry, hackers need to think twice, thrice, and for a few other times to think how to hack it, which is good. And possibly GraphQL perceives the data reference using inquiry language. So because it uses the inquiry language to go to the details. That's what it says. Is that clear now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Perfect. But don't try reading this again and again, because this can be a bit complicated, because this is so Wikipedia entry. Guys, now see, this is the thing about this Wikipedia entry. Sometimes these are written by some people who are really, I don't know, very high level. It get updated, but still, when you have a very unique explanation like this, people don't touch it more. So that's sometimes the problem. Yeah. Right, moving on. So then, of course, guys, this is how I'm introducing now. There's something called OWASP. Open Web, I can't remember the rest. So security, whatever, right? So this is an organization, huge organization. I would highly recommend for all of you to go there and get the membership, because you need OWASP content, and they have a very famous conference called AppSec, and then throughout the world they do a lot of conferences. Apart from that, even Sri Lanka, we have OWASP chapter. which is having some sessions in Meetup most of the time. So you guys should know about it. Most of you know. And OWASP first came up with something called a web security or web top 10 list, where you had things like XXS, SQL injection, directory traversal issues. So these are the common lists that is checked by a lot of people around the world, all the devs, architects, right? So then came OWASP mobile security top 10. And then of course there's a revision for web security. I think that's a very, very new revision. And then this is the next one, API security. So APIs is another one, because they are working on APIs because they know APIs, how popular they are now. So there are list of 10 here, starting from broken object level authorization to broken user authentication, excessive data exposure, lack of resource rate, blah, 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 it's going on injection. So this injection is very possible. I think you understand why, because it's also people who have a bit of experience about SQL injection knows that, yeah, injection is very possible here, because you can do the same thing with that creativity that I told you. And then improper asset management. So again, yes, so there can be concerns about the internal assets. So through APIs, you can access them. And of course, if I continue, okay, object level authorization. So because when you go in, you might get access to everything, right? So there can be broken access. So that doesn't mean you can access anything. You do the authentication, but authorization is something else. Authentication, guys, is who are you, right? When you go inside somebody's house, first thing that they ask is who are you. So you can say, who am I? I'm this person. And you go inside. It doesn't mean you can go to anywhere in that house. You can just sit down in the lobby. That's all. You can't go to a room of somebody's. You don't have the authorization. But soon as you go to your house, of course, you can get also authenticated. Your son comes and asks, or your mother comes and asks, who are you? Right? But when you go inside, you get the authentication, then you're authorized to access anything. You can go to any room, any blah, blah, blah. So two different things. So you can break into either authentication or the authorization. Both can be broken into. So this is one common thing about APIs. And excessive data exposure. So a lot of data can be exposed. Lack of resources, rate limit. Rate is like how you can access it and how many times you can access. So rate is not listed down. And then of course the other things, I think most of them you can understand. Right. So this is the next one you have to understand. When you talk about API, you have to look at the documentation. So documentation is always the key. Sometimes API have their own documentation for developers to use. This can be fantastic recon tool as well. Now I'm introducing another new concept called recon. That is like you going to passively understand what is going to, what is there actually, what are the assets, what are their services and everything. So by looking at that API itself, you can get to know how about how is it structurally represented in that company. So if you go to API for say Spotify, so by studying the Spotify API very carefully, which you can do, of course, you can understand what technologies they are using. Sometimes you can't, sometimes you can. Often they list endpoints and describe how to interact. So it's worth looking for target developer docs or target API. And also if you search for this with the target, you can get some information as well, because hackers do release documentation time to time. Right, okay. I'll take a 1 minute break. I've been talking and talking for almost 1 hour now. Yep, take a small 1 or 2 minutes break. Try to reflect on what you learned. මම කලිනුච්චිව මම හිතන්නේ ඔයගොල්ලන්ට Rome research හරි මොකක් හරි journal එකක් ලියන්න අද කරපු දේවල් හෙට ලියන්න. And also I asked you to use Anki cards. I don't know whether I did it, but Anki card, these flashcards are also very important. So just take 1 or 2 minutes and reflect, write down a few things about what you learned. Thank you. 2 minutes, huh? Or 2 to 3 minutes. All right, guys. Any questions? Any questions? Alistair, do you have any question? Nope. Lahiru, do you have any questions? Lahiru Ramesh or Myron, do you have any questions? I think Myron came late.
No, sir.
Yeah. We'll see whether any questions later. Taruka Samaraveera, do you have any
Yes,
questions?
sir. I have a question.
Yeah, Myron, go ahead.
This is regarding about the assignment.
Oh, hold on. We'll discuss that. Don't worry. We'll come to that. Huh?
Yeah,
We'll come to the
yeah,
assignment later.
okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay. We are going to discuss it. Don't worry. Right. Okay, then we'll go ahead. So what is Web API security? It's an all-encompassing term that implies practices and projects to prevent malicious attacks. So this is, guys, it's a great area. If you are into dev, this one, I think I talked to a few students here also. If you're into this, like, go ahead. I'll give you some platforms where you can earn some bucks as well. Apart from, you can internationally, you can build up your portfolio. Yeah, I think everybody is trying to go abroad because blaming the country, but I think that should be the case. You can start applying for remote work, guys. Rather, if you're getting 300,000, you can go for 600,000 jobs. Or if you're getting 500,000, you can get 1 million jobs. So earn from dollars these days. So what the hell? So we are the wrongdoers, right? Structure systems thinking now. So this is something that I want to quickly talk about. Think about our Sri Lankans. Are we bad? Bad as a percentage, the bad people in Sri Lanka is a lot less than any other country. Say US, as a percentage, US, there are so many depressed people, right? But depressed. So don't go into that unnecessary vicious loop. I think it's completely different here. There are a lot of good people, right? And also there are a lot of knowledgeable people. So the only thing is we don't have systems thinking. Then Balanda, just think about there was this serial killer in US. I can't remember his name. If you watch the documentary series, one of the best guys who managed to kill people efficiently because they had the systems thinking. America, Europe, even New Zealand, Australia, Japan, China, they have their own systems. We don't have systems thinking. Just hitala බලන්න ඕගොල්ලන් කාටද system සමහර කටට automatically එනවා තියෙනවා අම්මගෙන් තාත්තගෙන් ගච්ඡ systems thinking සල්ලි ඉතුරු කරන්න to go to your job in a faster smarter way, how to do your job in a smarter way, how to travel in the road in the smarter way. කීයෙන් කීයද හැමෝදම traffic එකට බැන බෙන්නවා කීයෙන් කීයද පැයකට කලින් නැගිටලා වැඩට යන්න. We don't do that because we are not into systems thinking. So just change your mind with your systems thinking. How many of you are investing? None of you. I think most of you, but I'm just talking the talk, right? So you have to use the systems thinking. I also was because that's the thing that is there. Everybody's blaming to the government, everybody blaming Mahinda Rajapaksa, and that's not the case. I think you should blame everyone, including ourselves. So if the dollar is going other way around, earn from dollars. What the shit? You know, that's what I'm trying to do. I built few courses. At least I've done something on that. So you guys also need to apply, use Glassdoor, use those other job platforms, try applying or do freelance work a bit, right? So if you're not in that type, go abroad. If not, start your business where you can earn from dollars. So just seriously think about it. I think that is very valuable. So this is Bug Bounties, this HackerOne platform, Bug Crowd platform. These are possible opportunities for you to get dollars and build your portfolio. And there are a lot of people who are doing that. I have one of my students in the cybersecurity masters who's working for an Australian client, and he's earning really good, and he's always happy, right? So whatever happens. Only thing is we should be very concerned about whether Sri Lanka is going to be another Afghanistan. Other than that, I think that's all our fault. Anyway, moving on. Since APIs have become key programming electronic collaboration and have become programmers' goals, subsequently basic authentication using only the client name and the password has been replaced. So that's very simple. So then you have something called multifaceted authentication. And APIs are built using either representation state move, so we talked about it, and engineering style, or we can use SOAP. And SOAP can be extended as assortment of low-level conventions. So simply saying, SOAP can be represent more details on HTTP. Whatever the case, now we know these are the two or these are types of calls that we are having in APIs. Right. And REST APIs use HTTP. Now we know that. And transport layer security, TLS, of course, that is being used by HTTP and deprecated beneath. And so there are some other things which are deprecated as well. And REST APIs likewise use JavaScript object notation, a book-based comprehensive information exchange. So these are the same things that we learned earlier. Right. So these are the things you have to worry about when you talk about API security. Have a look at it for a moment. All right, so you have user authentication, asset management, code injection, data exposure, object level authorization. So all this is what you have to configure. But remember, any of these things can go wrong. So because of that, we can actually go into that whole system through the API and can do any type of damage. Right? So you can inject code, you can expose the data, you can go and get object level authorization where you can go into object where I don't have access to and you can delete it, or you can do changes and all those crazy stuff. Right. So when you're wanting to do that, you can enumerate these APIs. The special word that we use in security is called enumeration, guys. Enumeration. So enumerating is like you are trying like a password attack. You are trying to enumerate different passwords. It's called enumeration, trying out. Very important. Sorry, important to API test. Enumerating API allows you to sure to know everything within the API. Enumerate karane kind brute forcing mane. Brute forcing is can combinations try out karne. So it's not enumeration. You can be doing intelligent enumeration as well. You can do prediction based enumeration also, where you can use something like machine learning. Our goal is to use our knowledge on how endpoints are constructed. Example, I think you all understand the example. User one edit exists. If it is existing, does orders one edit also exist? You can ask that question in your brain and then you can try it out. You can be fortunate most of the time because this is the same logic that people are using. Developers are very lazy, so they use the same structure. I don't have to put edit users this thing, no. So something like that. So that enforces the developer to use the same structure again and again. Just think about whether you are doing the same logic, right? So in your calls. So if that is the case, any hacker can obviously do like human level prediction. This is what should happen. Right. So enumeration RESTful APIs can be challenging to enumerate. We need to guess the resource names. We have to guess it. But there are a lot of places like this GitHub. There are places where I can get those keywords, right, to find resource names. Edit key. Sorry, resource name users can resource. Orders is another resource. So how do you get those resource names? There are GitHub listings. There are GitHub listings. So there's one called FuzzDB. So there's a word list that you can use to enumerate REST APIs. Right. GraphQL enumeration can be done in a very different way. You can't use resources tags because there's no resources. If you can remember GQL or GraphQL question mark, so that's how they use it. So they can use the normal resource ends, but they can use different injection techniques to do that. So I'm not going to go detail here because we can do it on exercise, like a workshop. Right. So then you have to understand API versions also. This is critical, guys. Right. So sometimes bugs get fixed in later versions, yes, but still the old versions are there. API v3 uses one edit, but v1 versus also can be there in some systems, right? So so you don't know, like you are working with a system, a client where they use the old version. So then they have not updated it. You know exactly if they are saying we have updated v3 with a good bug fix, you know, v1 has a bug, right? So why don't you search for places where they have used v1? So hope it's clear. So this is very simple, no? Very creative, right? Not any technical things here, right? The only technicality here is like it's REST. You can use the resource ends, otherwise you can't. If it is the other case like GraphQL. So what bugs are found in API? So there are a lot. The bold ones are the most common ones. Information disclosure, APIs can sometimes return more information than they need to. Sometimes this information shouldn't be returned, right? And also business logic. Guys, this is the gold mine. It's a gold mine. You know what is a gold mine, right? Lankawe nan gold naha, Lankawe tiyenne manik, right? So, but you know what is the idea behind this? So, business logic is still there's no standards. Can one of your good guys here or good ladies here can please let me know what are the business the standards that exist to write a business logic? Anyone, Vindana who talked earlier, Saminda, Izuru, Roshan, anyone? Can you, if you are writing business logic, are there any good standards, best practices to write business logics where it's like secure, it's like the best format? So can you please let me know, guys? Of course, there are these business logic languages also, but of course, I'm asking for all the ways that you can do. Yeah, Vindana, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Writing business logic, I mean, following a proper framework for writing business logics, I'm not familiar though. But when we are writing APIs, we are not writing, all the business logics in control, especially. Like you said, when we are exposing an API, the controller is the first hit, right?
Yes.
When the request is coming in. Right?
Yes.
Then what we do actually, in most of the cases, actually, we are creating a couple of layers. In the common word is actually we call layered architecture, or there are so many names, right? So what we do actually within the controller, we do all the security measures, right? We just checking whether the particular request is having enough rights, enough roles, like so and so, right? Then the request will pass into a use case or a business logic layer.
Sure.
Then only apply those things. So then what we do actually, every request will not come into the business layer first.
Understood.
It's it's filtered.
Okay.
That's what we do though. But
yeah,
writing logic wise, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Now, if I make a hypothetical question, okay, so somebody came through officially through the roles and then the rights. You came into a layer where now you are fondling with the business logic. Now, once you come there, I think there's no separate security layer thereafter, right? So then you are in a one business logic. You are inside that business logic. So there's no one to stop you from querying something else, isn't it?
Yeah, that's correct, sir. Yeah, it's already depend on the program that you read. Yeah,
exactly. So this is the point. So there's a lot of things to be improved in how you represent business logic. So maybe like this graphical business logic languages, I don't know, which use in Virtuoso, I believe. So there are different ones that you can use, maybe more stringent. But these are kind of big questions to ask. So people doing research, that's something that you can do research on. Still, people are really finding it's difficult to how to really do security there. But I'll provide you some case studies where you can study it, right? Okay, then the IDOs, very simple, in direct object references. So I'm not going to talk too much about this. So we can go through directories and find out ones which are not secure. Right, so testing this information. So again, so there are some case studies here, but today I think we don't have much time because I have to talk about a few more things. So discussing about some specific practicals we'll try to do later on. Right, so I will just skip on this one for the moment. Yeah, so these three we can do later on, IDOs. Yeah, so then we are talking about taking notes and getting comfortable APIs. Okay, that's enough for the moment. And let me take you to a few other important things which I want to talk about then. Okay, let me stop the video recording now.